Yes, the answer is yes. Donald Trump's Department of Justice can indeed change 180% their position that the Department of Justice had been taking under Joe Biden in every imaginable case, controversy, or issue relevant to the Department of Justice. And that includes changing positions on ATF regulations and the meaning and enforceability of the right to keep and bear arms under the Second Amendment. Let's get right into this now about what Trump can do with the Department of Justice by changing positions in a way that preserves and advances American liberty and our Constitution. Hey folks, I'm Mark Smith, host of the 4 Boxes Down, a proud American gun owner, constitutional attorney, member of the United States Supreme Court Bar, and I'm proud to say, with your help, the top voice of the Second Amendment, the 2025 Gun News Awards. Thank you so much for your support. It is a great honor to be the top voice of the Second Amendment in America today. All right, folks, so yes, it is true that it is typically the case when a new presidential administration takes over, it will change its legal positions on some legal issues, some legal matters, some cases. Now, these cases or issues that the Department of Justice under the new administration could also touch fingers with constitutional rights, such as the Second Amendment. It could also touch fingers with cases before the United States Supreme Court. That is the case. And as you know, Donald Trump is the new president of the United States with a much different vision of America and the Constitution and judges and gun rights and the Second Amendment than those held by Joe Biden and Joe Biden's handlers in the prior administration. And indeed, not only is it typically the case that you see new administrations taking on new positions, we're already starting to see it now. What do I mean by that? Even though Pam Bondi has not been confirmed as the Attorney General of the United States, although she will, even though the new Solicitor General, John Sauer, has not had a hearing or confirmed or anything like that, we have acting Attorney Generals and acting Solicitor Generals, which means they are temporary positions as acting officials. And they're already taking critical steps to advance freedom, to advance the Trump Make America Great, Make America Healthy Again agendas. This is good news. So I just want to talk to you for a few minutes because this is a little bit geeky, but it's important to understand. Obviously, as you know from watching this channel the last couple years, the Joe Biden administration, the Kamala Harris administration hated guns, hated your rights, hated freedoms, hated the First Amendment. And we're all about government censorship and government crackdown on all things freedom-loving, including the right to keep and bear arms. That is not going to be the case moving forward with this Trump administration. That I can promise you. I feel highly confident that that is correct. And we're already starting to see the benefits of this new Trump administration because the United States government, through the United States Department of Justice, is already starting to change its legal positions in favor of freedom and against the government. We'll give you several examples, but to begin with, in the state of Virginia, for example, there is a major lawsuit, and you're going to see why this is so good for us. There's a major lawsuit in Virginia, this is just one example, over cleaning up voting rolls involving who can vote in the election. There's a big controversy there in Virginia about who can vote in federal elections, the voter rolls, can you cleanse them, purge them, clean them up, whatever you want to say. And up until now, listen carefully, folks, up until now, the Joe Biden Department of Justice, with its multi-billion-dollar budget, has been supporting the left-wing cause of suing the state of Virginia, trying to stop them from purging the voter rolls and clean them up in a way that makes sense. Well, it turns out that the Trump Department of Justice has just announced that it is dropping its case against Virginia and is no longer going to support the positions that the Biden Department of Justice had been taking in this controversy. Specifically, this is what's being reported. The U.S. Justice Department sought Tuesday to pull out of an ongoing voting rights case against Virginia over the state's removal of names from voter rolls shortly before the November election. The department's motion for dismissal filed in the U.S. District Court for the Eastern District of Virginia does not end the case, because there are also private plaintiffs, including voting rights groups, challenging Virginia's action. This motion by the Department of Justice came soon after the Justice Department, now under the Trump administration, reversed the Biden administration's position in the case. So that's an example of how the Department of Justice was using its power and prestige, frankly, to basically limit voter integrity rules, as I see it, as I understand it, and is now switching sides, which is allowed to do. Now, this is not the only example we're seeing this in the United States. There's several other cases that are right now before the U.S. Supreme Court. There's several cases dealing with freezing student debt. As you know, Joe Biden was trying to pay off student loan recipients that had student loans but couldn't pay them back. Now, what that really was, as you know it, at least as I understand it, that was really a kind of a metaphor or euphemism, if you will, for paying off his political constituencies, meaning social workers that work for the government with low income, low salaries, public school teachers, people that worked for public administrations, basically, any kind of government workers. They had all these student loans and all these crazy measures. They went to work for the government in various cities, helping refugees or illegal aliens, whatever it was. And Joe Biden wanted to give them loan forgiveness to basically pay them off for their vote. That's at least kind of how I saw the political dynamics here. And of course, the Supreme Court said that was not allowed, and all sorts of fights occurred. So there's an ongoing fight here, and there's one involving the U.S. Supreme Court. And I'm happy to report that the acting Solicitor General, Sarah Harris, has literally written letters to the U.S. Supreme Court saying that the Biden position, when it ran the Department of Justice, would now be changed and flipped in the student debt fights. Also in several environmental cases, I'm happy to report that they're already telling the U.S. Supreme Court that the new position of the Department of Justice is now going to be different than the position the Department of Justice was taking under Joe Biden. This is not a shock, but this is extremely good news, because the Department of Justice not only brings prestige to a particular legal controversy, they also bring a lot of money and resources. So as I envision this, and I got my fingers crossed, and we'll see what happens when kind of everyone gets into place and the administration can move forward, I really would like to see, for example, the Office of Civil Rights within the U.S. Department of Justice under Donald Trump begin to pursue school districts that, let's say, don't respect parents' rights, that going after government prosecutors, perhaps, that harassed churches and religious people for embracing the religion, the Latin Mass and things like this. I would like to potentially see the Office of Civil Rights or other aspects of the Department of Justice under Donald Trump perhaps launch investigations using what I like to call institutional reform litigation tactics against, let's say, police departments and other governmental agencies responsible for issuing concealed carry licenses. And if they're dragging their feet and not issuing those licenses either at an appropriate financial amount, which should be very modest or de minimis, as well as dragging their feet and delaying the issuance of those concealed carry licenses, I would like to see the Donald Trump U.S. Department of Justice weigh in on those by launching subpoenas and investigations and trying to pressure those law enforcement agencies to comply with the Second Amendment, which we actually have seen over and over and over again in American life. Whenever we see a police department, for example, allegedly misbehaving in various ways, they will launch an investigation into that police department. An example, just to pick one example, in kind of recent memory, you all know that in Ferguson, Missouri, there was that case involving the gentle giant Michael Brown that was shot and killed by a police officer out there. And of course, what happened in there was like 50 FBI agents descended upon the Ferguson Police Department, as well as the Department of Justice, and all sorts of investigations were launched to try to see if there are violations of Michael Brown's civil rights, who again was shot by a police officer. Ultimately, I believe it was understood to be in self-defense. But the point is not about what happened in that particular case, beyond to say that it's an example where the federal Department of Justice has a lot of sway and can pick and choose where they go. And it seems to me, I would like to urge them to look at places that are very slow to issue concealed carry permits, because those that are slow to issue concealed carry permits are effectively denying Americans the fundamental right to keep and bear arms by denying them what the U.S. Supreme Court said in Bruin you are entitled to, which is the right to carry a handgun concealed on your body in self-defense in anticipation of a confrontation in case you may need it. And I think that would be the position of the Trump administration moving forward, and I'd like to see them be aggressive, and I have a feeling that might very well happen. So I want to answer this question because a lot of people have asked me this, and I want to clear it up. The bottom line is, yes, the Department of Justice under Donald Trump can drop lawsuits that have been filed. They can drop investigations that have been started. They can start new investigations that Joe Biden refused to start. For example, we've talked about the case involving, I believe, the Capitol police officer that was involved with the killing of Ashley Babbitt. For example, that was not investigated in any real way, as I understand it, by the Joe Biden Department of Justice. That was on federal property, so that would fall within the Department of Justice's jurisdiction, which means that the Trump Department of Justice would be able to launch an investigation into the killing of Ashley Babbitt if it so chose. So it seems to me there are a lot of ways for the Donald Trump Department of Justice to actually do the right thing and to use the tactics of the left in using the power and prestige of the Department of Justice to advance agenda items that, frankly, are traditional American values that restore the Constitution to a place it never should have left, including protecting the right to free speech under the First Amendment, protecting religious liberties under the First Amendment, and, of course, protecting the right to keep and bear arms under the Second Amendment, as well as protecting Fifth and 14th Amendment due process rights in the context of, let's say, the application of state laws, of so-called red flag laws, which is really a euphemism or political propaganda term for getting around the due process protections we see in long-standing, well-established, ubiquitous civil commitment processes that ensure massive due process protections in favor of American citizens, and red flag laws try to get around that. And I think Donald Trump could look into all of that. And by the way, for those of you who have asked me about what do I think about Pam Bondi and Donald Trump, and all I'm going to say without getting into the details is this. We live in the year of our Lord 2025. This is not 2018, in February 14, 2018, on the aftermath of the Parkland school shooting in Florida. We are in a new world, and a much better world. The understanding of the Second Amendment, the understanding of guns, the understanding of the Supreme Court's jurisprudence, including the 2022 decision in Bruin, I think has opened up a lot of people's eyes. I think a lot of YouTube channels and other people involved in the Second Amendment community, many of you out there who are probably watching this, I think it has really elevated the game of the Second Amendment community intellectually, scholarship-wise, and so on, that I don't think the kind of mishaps and sloppy-poppy language that may have been used by President Trump or Attorney General Bondi and others back in 2018, 2019, I don't think those things will be repeated, because the level of sophistication across the board of our Second Amendment community is so much better than it used to be. And of course, we now have, approximately 30 states with permitless carry. So the understanding of carrying guns and the importance of carrying guns is so much more understood today than it was even 5 or 6 years ago during the Donald Trump administration. So I think some of the alleged or arguable mistakes that may have been made in the past, I think the odds of them being made a second time, not nearly as likely as it might have been without the education and efforts of people such as yourself out there at home, fighting for our right to keep and bear arms and elevating our game, scholarship, intellectual arguments, and the like on X, YouTube, Rumble, and so on. So I got my fingers crossed that the Trump administration will be doing right by America on all sorts of issues, including but not limited to the right to keep and bear arms under our Second Amendment. So there you have it, folks. I hope you learned a little bit something here today. Make sure you follow me on X at 4Boxes Diner. Make sure you subscribe to YouTube and Rumble. We're trying to get to 200,000 subscribers on YouTube. And again, I thank you very much for tuning in. I look forward to talking to all of you again very, very soon here at the 4Boxes Diner.
Orders up. Table 2A.